The Alzheimer's Gene Controlling APOE by Dr. Michael Grieger, 2016, and nutritionfacts.org. And consider joining that site, nutritionfacts.org, particularly if you're thinking about becoming vegan, but even if you aren't, it has so much science-backed information about nutrition, particularly about animal products, but it also has a lot of information about a plant-based diet. And of course, just to reiterate, veganism is an ethical position, rejecting animals as property, but it also has ancillary benefits of health, and also one can seriously address the climate crisis if one adopts a plant-based diet. Of course, veganism is more than a diet. It's rejecting animals as property for food, clothing, entertainment, and other reasons. Anyway, I thought this was an interesting article to add to the last one that I've just read out. And it shows how something that is basically at this point incurable, how it can be prevented to a great degree through diet. Even if you have a gene like a lot of Nigerians have a gene which makes them more susceptible to Alzheimer's, and yet they have the lowest rates of Alzheimer's disease. The gene is APOE4. So the title of the article is The Alzheimer's Gene. Oh, and before I continue, the reason I'm reading this out, being a former health professional, but also a vegan as well, and having seen the devastations of dementia and Alzheimer's, when one sees that, it's so incredibly sad. It happened to my grandmother, and she went from being very loving and friendly to incredibly unfriendly, and rejected me because I wouldn't buy into some of the sort of basically behavioral problems of her, thinking that people were stealing from her and all that kind of thing. And so just at the end of her life, she sort of cut off from me. But that was okay, because I knew why. I knew that she was suffering from dementia. But these things, one doesn't have to get dementia and Alzheimer's as one ages. My mother is a great example of that. She lived till 104. She died a little bit over a year ago. And she was compos mentis and completely capable of just a normal conversation right up until about 12 or 24 hours before she died, when they had her on morphine, some heavy morphine, and she just went out to it. But she was actually, her blood pressure was very good, even though she wasn't eating a plant-based diet, but she had controlled her blood pressure through medication. And so she was always very good with her health, except she could have benefited greatly from eating a plant-based diet, but that wasn't going to happen. But she went to the doctors regularly, and she kept an eye on her blood pressure and her cholesterol. She wasn't into, sort of eating a lot of, she was really, really not very good with her diet at all, but she kept an eye on her blood pressure and her cholesterol levels, and that served her very well right until the end. So, I mean, my mother is an example of that. It isn't predestined that one gets dementia or Alzheimer's. You just have to make sure you look after your blood pressure and your cholesterol levels, keep them down, do exercise. She was always very good with exercising. She didn't go out on walks or anything, but she was always, pottering around at home, and she wasn't really overweight. All those different factors. And she also took vitamin D, and vitamin D, that's D for David. That's a very, very important thing, even though people think that you can get vitamin D just by getting some sunlight every day. Well, it turns out that's not enough for modern day living. Apparently, we just don't spend anywhere near as much time in the sun to get the required amount that we need of vitamin D. And I think that's because people in the old days tended to spend more time outdoors, and so they got adequate amounts of sun, but they also got melanoma. So that is another problem. Skin cancer is a problem with spending too much time in the sun. But vitamin D, it is seeming more and more so, because of the widespread vitamin D deficiency in the world today, that it is important to take a daily supplement. And it's recommended between 2,000 units to 4,000 or 5,000 units a day. I take about 4,000 to 5,000 units a day, and my vitamin D levels are quite good. But before I did that, I wasn't taking vitamin D. Before that, I actually found out through a blood test that I had very, very low levels of vitamin D. And it wasn't even because I was living in Tasmania, where it was, we don't get a whole lot of sun for some parts of the year. It's a cooler climate here. It wasn't really that, because I was getting sun, and it just wasn't enough. And somebody close to me also was getting much more sun than I was, and it wasn't enough. And it's a widespread problem, particularly for people who have darker skin, like black people, people of color. They have very low levels of vitamin D often in their skin, and that is contributing sometimes to the severe COVID symptoms and also diabetes. There are a whole host of issues. We can get a whole host of illnesses, serious illnesses, cancer, diabetes, Parkinson's. A whole range of serious illnesses are attributed to low vitamin D blood levels. So it's really, really important, and that's why I mention it so often, because I want you to be healthy. I want lots of people to be healthy. I don't want people to get diabetes. That is something that takes up a lot of people's lives these days, because they are sort of in a weight range that is not healthy. They're also eating animal products, and those animal products contain animal fats, and animal fats have been attributed to insulin resistance in the muscle. And so you can even reverse diabetes. It's been proven you can reverse diabetes too through a plant-based diet, and also having adequate vitamin D levels in one's circulatory system. So it's really, really important that we do that. So anyway, these are different things we can do to prevent some serious illnesses. Getting adequate vitamin D through supplementation, getting adequate B12 through supplementation, because even people who are not vegan are suffering from B12 deficiency, and it's really, really important. And also you can get build up of homocysteine in your system. Homocysteine thickens the blood, and the next thing you know, you're having strokes and heart attacks and all of that kind of thing. So taking B12 is really, really, really important for us. I think it's about 2,500 micrograms a week is the minimum of B12, so consider taking that. And keeping one's blood pressure around 125 or 120 over, 60 or 70, something like that. But the systolic, keeping that down to about definitely below 130, but it's best around 120 something. Even 110 is even better. So when doctors say to people, when you're aging, they say, oh, that's your cholesterol's fine, or your blood pressure's fine. So oftentimes that means fine for a person of your age. And when most people are consuming animal products, that actually usually means their blood pressure is elevated to even over 130 is not great, and has been attributed to heart attacks eventually. And having high cholesterol levels, or levels that are elevated, is quite normal for people that are eating animal products. And so when doctors say to you, oh no, your blood pressure is fine, or your cholesterol levels are fine for somebody of your age, or they just say it's fine, what they're meaning is it's pretty normal for someone your age. That doesn't mean it's good, though. Doesn't mean that is something that you should have, or that is going to serve you well as you progress in life. And there are even children now who are seen as having plaque, from animal products in their arteries. They've done autopsies on children that have died in car crashes, etc., or other events, and they found that they have buildup of cholesterol in their arteries, plaque in their arteries, which is really, really sad and says a lot about our diet. And also Americans in particular suffer from that, but they also suffer from incredibly low rates of incredibly low ingestion of fiber, which is essential for health, to have fiber. And that is something that is incredibly missing from the American diet. So all these things, and you can find out so much from this site, nutritionfacts.org. And I'm not saying I endorse everything that is said on there, because I think he's not against people eating honey, which, honey is exploiting bees. It's taking what is not ours. So he also doesn't come from an ethical position about non-human animals. He's talking about health, and that, as I said, is an ancillary benefit of being vegan. It's not veganism. Veganism is not about health. It's not about the climate crisis, but addressing those issues happens when we become vegan. They're ancillary benefits of being vegan. So anyway, all these things, the reason I'm mentioning this is because there is no real free healthcare in the United States. A lot of people don't really get to see doctors very often, if at all, and if they don't have any knowledge about health and about blood pressure and all, and how important all that is, their vitamin D levels, etc., then they're sort of an accident waiting to happen. And so, it's really important that people who don't have access to free healthcare, like in the United States, have to educate themselves about these issues. And I feel like this site, nutritionfacts.org, is a very, very good site for that. So I think people could actually save their lives in a way, and save their health, and live quite good, happy, healthy lives if they educate themselves from this site. And there are people saying, well, I've eaten whatever I wanted and I lived, I'm old, I'm 85 now, but it turns out oftentimes people that are in that age, they've been not so well for the last 15, 20 years. So, even though somebody might end up dying at, say, 85 or 90, they may have spent the last 25 years in not very good health. So it doesn't mean that, it's fine to eat animal products, and that, because some people end up living till they're 85, 90. Who knows how many tablets, medications they're on for this and that, and how they feel, and how their mental capacity was towards the end, and all of that kind of thing. So, I prefer people to go vegan for ethical reasons, which is what veganism is, meaning that we don't have the rights to use animals as property. It's basically legal slavery in the 21st century, and they're sentient, so we don't have a right to use them. I prefer people go vegan because of that, but you can also consider that there's so many other reasons too that are just support that as well. So many reasons why animal products don't belong in our bodies, and this site in relation to health really, really exposes that to the degree where, if you really did research on this site, Nutrition Facts, you probably will be starting to think that animal products are really like poison, that you're ingesting poison when you eat them. Anyway, so I'm going to read this, and then I might even read another article after that, because if we don't have our minds, basically, if we're not able to function, and if we get Alzheimer's, we're pretty much where we lose all real function, and eventually it kills us. The Alzheimer's gene controlling APOE by Dr. Michael Greger. Diet may explain the Nigerian paradox where they have among the highest rates of Alzheimer's susceptibility gene, APOE4, but among the lowest rates of Alzheimer's disease. Back in the 1990s, a major susceptibility gene was discovered for Alzheimer's called APOE4. If we have APOE4 gene, either from our mum and dad, like about 15% of the US population do, our risk of getting Alzheimer's is tripled. And if we're like the 1 in 50 folks who have APOE4 genes from both parents, we may be at 9 times the risk. The highest frequency of APOE4 in the world is in Nigeria, but they also have some of the lowest Alzheimer's rates. To understand this paradox, one has to understand the role of APOE. What does the APOE gene do? APOE is the principal cholesterol carrier in the brain. So the Nigerians' diet appeared to have trumped their genes due to their low cholesterol levels from their low intake of animal fat, living off mainly grains and vegetables. High APOE-A, but Alzheimer's a rarity, thanks perhaps to low cholesterol levels, which any of us can achieve eating healthfully. These findings suggest that long-term changes in plasma cholesterol can lead to changes in APOE gene expression. Just because we may have been dealt with some bad genetic cards doesn't mean we can't reshuffle the deck with diet. We cannot change our genetic makeup, but we can reduce or prevent high cholesterol. In this study of 1,000 people for over 20 years, APOE4 double the odds of Alzheimer's, but high cholesterol nearly triple the threat. So the risk of Alzheimer's disease from treatable factors, elevated cholesterol and blood pressure, appears to be greater than that from the dreaded Alzheimer's susceptibility gene. In fact, projecting from their data, controlling lifestyle factors could reduce a person's risk for Alzheimer's disease, even if they have the double APOE gene, from 9 or 10 times the odds just down to 2. People tend to have a fatalistic view toward developing Alzheimer's disease, like it's going to happen if it's going to happen. if it's going to happen, but studies like this undermine such a view. We just need to emphasize the need for preventing and treating high blood pressure and cholesterol in the first place to reduce our risk for heart disease, stroke, and Alzheimer's disease, and as a result, potentially enhance quality and quantity of life. Of equal importance, these data should be comforting to anyone interested in attempting to reduce the risk for and future burden of Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease, written by Dr. Michael Grieger from nutritionsfacts.org. My mum's mother died of Alzheimer's disease. As a kid, I loved spending time with her. She was the perfect and perfectly doting grandmother. She'd want to take me to toy stores, but geeky me, I just wanted to go to the library. When we get back to the house, my arms filled with borrowed books, she'd let me sit way back on her big couch and read and draw pictures. Then she'd bring me blueberry muffins she made with a big mechanical mixer that took up half the kitchen counter. Later in life, my grandmother started to lose her mind. By then, I was in medical school, but my newfound knowledge was useless. She had turned. My previously sweet and stately grandmother now threw things at people. She cursed. Her caretaker showed me the teeth marks on her arm where my once kind, loving grandmother had bitten her. That's the horror of brain disease. Unlike a problem with your foot or your back or even another vital organ, brain disease can attack yourself. Alzheimer's disease, which kills nearly 85,000 Americans each year, is one of the most physically and emotionally burdensome diseases for both sufferers and caregivers. Unlike stroke, which can kill instantly and without any warning, Alzheimer's involves a slower, more subtle decline over months or years. Instead of cholesterol-filled plaques in your arteries, plaques made of a substance called amyloid develop in the brain tissue itself, associated with the loss of memory and eventually loss of life. Despite the billions of dollars spent on research, there is still neither a cure nor an effective treatment for the disease, which invariably progresses to death. In short, Alzheimer's is reaching a state of crisis emotionally, economically, and even scientifically. The good news, as a senior scientist at the Center for Alzheimer's Research, entitled a review article, is that, quote, Alzheimer's disease is incurable but preventable, end quote. Diet and lifestyle changes could potentially prevent millions of cases a year. How? There is an emerging consensus that, quote, what is good for our hearts is also good for our heads, end quote, because clogging of the arteries inside of our brain with atherosclerotic plaque is thought to play a pivotal role in the development of Alzheimer's disease. It is not surprising, then, that the dietary centerpiece of the 2014, quote, Dietary and Lifestyle Guidelines for the Prevention of Alzheimer's Disease, end quote, published in the Journal of Neurobiology of Aging, was, quote, vegetables, legumes, that's beans, peas, and lentils, fruits, and whole grains should replace meats and dairy products as primary staples of the diet, end quote. We generally think of atherosclerosis as a condition of the heart, but a substantial body of evidence strongly associates atherosclerotic arteries with Alzheimer's disease. Autopsies have shown repeatedly that Alzheimer's patients tend to have significantly more atherosclerotic plaque buildup and narrowing of the arteries within the brain and the clogging of the arteries inside and leading to the brain with cholesterol-filled plaque can drastically reduce the amount of blood and therefore oxygen your brain receives. In light of such findings, some experts have even suggested that Alzheimer's be reclassified as a vascular disorder. A study of 300 Alzheimer's patients found that treating vascular risk factors such as high cholesterol and blood pressure may even slow the progression of the disease, but not stop it. That's why prevention is the key, and it's never too early to start eating healthier. Dietary decisions you make now may directly influence your health much later in life, including the health of your brain. Anyway, there's a number of videos here about Alzheimer's and how to, there's brain healthy foods to fight aging, and a number of different articles, and videos that you can watch. Anyway, for those who are not vegan, who don't eat a plant-based diet, please consider eating a plant-based diet. Firstly, consider going vegan for the animals, since we don't need animal products at all to survive, and we can easily meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. But we can also save our health significantly and feel much better, and we can also address the climate crisis significantly by being vegan. So thanks for watching. Till next time, bye for now.